The city of Poznan started as a stopover of convenience while I was driving through the west of Poland, but it's now a city that I would totally recommend to anyone who is exploring this wonderful country. Here I sampled possibly the best pastry I've ever had in my life, and if that's not a good enough reason to go, well, the city is also very charming with a great atmosphere, but a complex and often sad history that's on full display in many corners of the city. It is relatively small and perfect to explore on foot in just a day or two. Before we head out for the day, a quick shout out to the Focus Hotel where I stayed that night. It was one of the better hotels I encountered in my Poland road trip and was really great value. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. It was a short and pleasant walk to the city, which passed through some leafy streets and over the Warta River. I was surprised how many people were just hanging out on the water's edge. Makes me realise just how spoiled I am living in Sydney, with the stunning harbour and beaches we have at our fingertips. Today I'll be walking in a big loop around the city, with my final destination being the Old Market Square by the evening. Just on the fringe of the Old Town is the Świecie Marcin Road, which is dotted with a number of landmarks in between hotels and shopping areas. Some of the notable stops include the monument of Stary Marek, which is based on a fictional character rather than a historical figure of significance, which I found quite amusing in a city like Poznan. Speaking of amusing symbols, a nearby hotel had this gigantic mural of two goats. Now, at the time, I had no idea what this meant, but I certainly figured it out once I got to the market square later that day. But already, I'm getting the impression that it's a city that doesn't take itself too seriously and has a sense of humour. Further along is the Enigma Cipher Centre. If you liked the Imitation Game movie, then you'll probably enjoy this museum on the history of Polish mathematicians tasked with breaking the Enigma code back in World War II. And then just next door is the Imperial Castle. Much of this area was under construction at the time that I visited, but hopefully by the time you get there, it'll be a little easier to navigate. The next stop was a monument commemorating the Poznan protests of 1956. What started as a march for better living conditions escalated into riots that led to many deaths in the city. It's a very imposing monument and one that really catches the eye when you walk past. Just behind this spot is another nice green space, complete with flower beds, a fountain, and the Grand Theatre in the background. It was at this point that I would change direction and head straight into the middle of the old city. On the way, this ice cream place caught my eye just because of the long line that snaked around the corner. It's called Kolorowa, and it's just a couple of blocks from the Grand Theatre, but that line was far too long for me, so if anyone does have time to stop over and try it out, please let us know in the comments if it was any good. The next major landmark was Wolności Square, a big open space that is used for events such as the Poznan Christmas markets and various large-scale gatherings. The main feature is the Freedom Fountain, which is a very unique structure at one end of this big square, and it's surrounded by some grand architecture, with the library and National Museum being the most impressive structures. At the opposite end is this remembrance to another Polish uprising that took place in 1919. While there's not much around to explain this further, it's another reminder of just how complicated the history of this city has been. We're now on the home stretch to the Old Market Square, with one more minor detour on the way to see the Royal Castle, which sits on top of a small hill. I had hoped to check out the observation deck so I could see the view over the top of the Old Town, but by this time of the day, unfortunately, it already closed. We've finally made it to the Old Market Square in the centre of Poznan, and it has that familiar look of colourful buildings around the perimeter, and of course you'll find them full of restaurants, bars and nightclubs. But there are some differences that are unique to Poznan, the best known being the goats. Every day at midday, Two goats emerge from the clock tower and butt heads. I don't know why. Unfortunately, I arrived too late in the day to witness this puppet extravaganza. But to be honest, I don't think I missed that much. This does, however, explain the big goat mural that I saw earlier on the side of the big hotel. The town hall building where this all happens is a magnificent sight even without the goats. The detail around the archways and the size of the facade with the bell tower way up high makes it a very impressive structure relative to the size of the square. You have the fountain of Prosperina on one side and a row of colourful merchant houses on the other, and just behind all of this is a very lively laneway hidden in the centre of the square. If you walk past the merchant houses and down a side street in the corner of the square, you'll find the Farah Church. The pink facade really catches the eye at the end of this street, and while you can venture inside, there was a service going on at the time, so no recording allowed. But the outside is much brighter and vibrant than any of the interior. Now, with the sun going down and my feet incredibly sore from all this walking, it was time to eat and enjoy a glass of wine for my efforts. For something different, I decided to try some Georgian cuisine at a small restaurant just outside the main square. That pasty looking dish tasted about as good as it looked, but everything else was actually quite nice. The waitress had to give me a quick lesson in how to eat these dumplings because I clearly had no idea what I was doing. The trick is to turn them upside down so you can avoid that thicker knot of dough in the center and you get all the goodness inside with only the lighter skin around the base. As darkness fell, the square continued to come alive. There is plenty of action to be found here until the sun comes up again, but it was time for me to retreat back to the hotel. I had two things on my to-do list for the second day in Poznan before I would hit the road again. The first was to start my day indulging in the local pastries, and my God, this was a treat. I know the city is well known for croissants, but I'd been tipped off to try the Yagozhenka. This could quite possibly be the best pastry thing I've ever had. My God, it is good. It's so creamy in the middle. The blackberries are so fresh and full of flavour, and the pastry's so flaky. Oh, I'm blown away. Obviously, I really enjoyed myself. The bakery was called Ina Piekania, and I'll include this in the description so you can also find it. It's a must visit if you're in town. I only had time for one more activity and had to choose between visiting a museum or heading out to the Srodka district to see the famous neighbourhood mural and explore the area. I chose the former so that I could see a broader selection of Polish arts. There are also some internationally famous works there, but unfortunately, the wing of the museum that has them on display was closed for renovation. This includes Monet's Beach in Pourville, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing wrong. Just imagine it with a more French accent. But this didn't take much away from the experience. The open sections were huge and I found plenty that I enjoyed. From the colourful to the complex and the just plain weird. I still can't tell if this is meant to look like a nipple or if it was a studio accident, then had a frame slapped around it and was called art. This was my favourite painting in the museum. It's intended to represent our lack of comprehension of the supernatural. I found this very relatable because I don't believe in the supernatural at all. But what would I know? Maybe I'm wrong. But I do love the power of imagination, and I think there's something to be said about all that happens in the world that you can't see through the power of people's imaginations. So the gallery was full of surprises, as was the city of Poznan. It's a really fun and modern city that retains a lot of old world charm and has some fascinating stories to tell.